and welcome to another episode of POV, your favorite web political series. Now today, we've got some very serious topics to get into. We're talking cyclones and tobacco. So let's get it. The devastating effects of Cyclone Idai have taken the attention of the nation by storm. In an amazing display of social responsibility, the people of Zimbabwe have taken onus of the situation. Companies, churches, community groups, and individuals continue pouring in their support for their fellow man. It remains encouraging to see such concern and care being on display by the people of this country, particularly at a time when everyone's resources are strapped. But at the center of the conversation surrounding the response to the situation, the government's role in the matter remains an issue of debate. The central question is, of course, should we have been better prepared? And that's where the focus of this piece lies. How well prepared for disasters is our nation's authorities and agencies? Now, disaster governance can be segmented into three main components: preparedness, response, and recovery. So far, we've witnessed the first two with regards to the cyclone. So our first question was, did the government not have a reference point to be better prepared for this situation? A former researcher for the Met Office by name of H. Pellet conducted a research in the 1970s, compiling a list of tropical cyclones which impacted Zimbabwe and other countries in the region. His research compiled information on cyclones from as early as 1904, going well into the late 60s. That's decades worth of research that displays real evidence of cyclone activity in our region. We also have recent history to look to. Cyclone Bonita made headlines in 1996, killing and displacing people, livestock, and destroying houses and crops. Then there was Cyclone Eline in 2000, which at the time was the worst recorded cyclone in half a century. Cyclone Japhet in 2003, Cyclone Fabio in 2007, Cyclone Dineo in 2017, and now Cyclone Idai, with all devastating effects. Clearly, we need to put some respect on these names. Then there's flooding. In 2006 and 2008, heavy rains that lashed Zimbabwe and the region brought floods that claimed the lives of more than 75 people and displaced thousands. Then in 2014, there was the Mukosi Dam, which overflowed, leaving thousands of people marooned and hundreds and thousands of students out of school. So there's research and evidence to show that our region and country is prone to disasters, that routine maintenance of infrastructure should be taken seriously, but the biggest factor, of course, is that the effects of climate change should be taken seriously. Now, in all those cases, report after report found that despite early warnings of impending disaster, government is almost always found terribly wanting in terms of preparedness and disaster management, casting doubts on the efficacy of the role of the CPU. So what's the issue? Why is there no urgency from the government? Well, the CPU for a long time has been underfunded, undermining their ability to be effective in these situations. One shocking case that can be highlighted is in 2013-2014, when the CPU required $5 million to address an issue and were only given $450,000. And in another case, they required $20 million and were given $75,000. So I think we've come a long way for seeing $50 million being dispersed. However, a few years back, Alexander Rusero, a local political analyst, said, "Government has been relying on non-governmental organizations in humanitarian assistance, yet they should play second fiddle." Clearly, this is still the case. Even in our last report on hospitals, the same issue of reliance on aid was raised. Surely, we should be better poised to be at the center of our own solution rather than seeking aid as the primary. Aid must never be considered the first port of call. It should always be an assisting factor. So here's the kicker. According to international standards, aid is only deployed when the capacity of a community or country to respond and recover from a disaster is overwhelmed. So are we saying that from 1904 to last week, we're still okay being default overwhelmed? Surely something has to change. But here's the real story, Zimbabwe. You are the heroes of this story. Your urgency, your compassion, and your involvement have all set the tone for the activities surrounding the response. We always say Zimbabweans are angry and very polarized and incapable of doing anything productive together without politicizing it. But your response has had the naysayers proved otherwise. The local communities did not wait for helicopters or SMSs or defense units. They just started helping. And this should be an eye-opening factor for the leaders of this country. That a relationship of broken promises does not inspire people to wait on your call. That Zimbabweans feel alienated and are not in tune with the journey that you're taking us on, that when it really comes to it, we still believe that we are the best solution to our problems. In December, Cyclone Idai is expected to hit our shores. Let's see how the leaders of this country react to that, because we will do what is needed. Now, the tobacco auction floor is open to a typically chaotic start, with the usual issue of price being front and center. However, this year, in addition to price, issues of confusions and disgruntlement by farmers over the split between the currencies they'll be paid in and the 2% tax that they were going to be charged on their sales was also hot on the scene. You see, the MPS had originally stated that farmers would be given 30% of their fee in foreign currency. In addition, there would also be a 2% intermediated money transfer tax on their sales. Now, after a tough meeting between the farmers and the RBZ and threats of holding on to crops, the government buckled and told farmers that they would be paid 50% in US dollars and 50% in RTGS. They also removed the 2% tax, which has brought optimism over the improvement of sales. Now, if the RBZ can be so finicky about their rules, one wonders why they even have them in place in the first place. That's food for thought. But you see, the real issue with tobacco is that the system largely favors the manufacturer over the farmer. You see, in the current system where large tobacco corporates fund and buy tobacco from the growers, the pricing system is inherently not fair, as large tobacco companies have all the power. What makes it worse is that there's no set price for the crop, like other crops, and so there's no room for a lot of irregularities and manipulation. So one may conclude that perhaps the government may not always be at the center of dictating prices and other polarizing issues, that perhaps maybe a system of influence that needs to be purged has to be curbed in order for us to find a better way for these tobacco farmers. But you see, the issue with tobacco farmers doesn't just end with tobacco. It's about the farming industry in general. Zimbabwe is one of the few countries in the world where one farms at a premium and sells at a loss. Now, most tobacco farmers make and earn their money once in a year. And one of the key things they need to do is to have money that they can preserve the value of what they did for financing future activities. Now, how is the government expecting farmers to preserve the value of crops for a year when they're paying them in RTGS, which loses money by the day? The same goes for the potato farmer, whose inputs are almost entirely in US, but deals in a market offering RTGS. Related to this is also the fact that if farmers get paid in RTGS, they are being disadvantaged because the bank rate is substantially lower than the street one, which in reality is where everyone is getting their forex. So if they can't recoup their money from the bank or the black market, they will, as most farmers are already doing, scaling back productivity or boycotting certain crops. If farmers by and large start these survival practices, the implications are for us very plain to see. Prices will go up because the market will start having to import more and more. Now, we all know that farming is the anchor of our economy, and yet at times it receives very little support or attention from the government. If we're going to turn this economy around, better subsidies and policies need to be implemented for farmers. So far, there's been no guarantee put in place to ensure that the farmers will receive their foreign currency. And having seen so many examples where the government has failed to honor its commitments on forex, I think this will be an easy win for them. If for once they honored their word and actually did right by these tobacco farmers, we might actually start to believe that for a change, the policies implemented by this administration are actually trying to move this country forward. This is Kuda Mangwe, wishing you a good morning, a good afternoon, and good night.